Coming up on Chasing the Natty, we're continuing Dynasty Month, and today we brought on Ethan Sauers and Justice from our Campus to Canton CFF team to break down some supplemental players that you could be targeting in your Dynasty leagues. All this and more coming right after this.
Caleb Williams dancing, cutting, mesmerizing run by the quarterback.
Marvin Harrison Jr. touchdown. Marvelous Marv.
Home next to the end zone, dropped down for Franklin. A majestic touchdown.
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast.
So welcome to Chasing the Natty. I'm Justice. We have Ethan here today. No Jared. He's got some personal business to take care of, so we're stepping up and taking care of this week. How you doing, Ethan?
Doing well, man. It's Mother's Day weekend and trying to squeeze some time in for a little bit of college fantasy talk. So definitely excited to join you and talk about some supplemental targets here, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm as soon as we're done, I think we're doing our Mother's Day this evening, taking my wife and my mother-in-law out to dinner. So try and avoid the rush of tomorrow, but maybe
absolutely
it'll be pretty busy.
We did brunch with my mom this morning and taking care of my wife's mom's family this evening, and then tomorrow's all about my wife and celebrating her day. So excited for it.
So happy Mother's Day to all, right? And all you dads out there, make sure your fathers, make sure you show appreciation for your mothers and your wives.
Absolutely. It's a day late if you're listening to this on Monday, but flowers anytime is always a good idea. So.
Right. So before we get started, just a couple. I kind of want to do Jared's, spiel here. If you want to support what we're doing here for college fantasy football, make sure you go over and subscribe to the campus at campuscanton.com, where you'll find all our written content, tools, guides, everything you need for your CFF, C2C, and Devy fantasy needs. IDP is there as well. And we got plenty of more things coming your way. The Devy guide just dropped the first of this month. I know Ethan, myself, and all the other folks on the CFF team are actively and rapidly working on the CFF guide. We're currently doing the team previews, and I think the plan for that is to drop June 1st. So definitely that's something that you want to get for your CFF leagues. Make sure you follow Jared and the show on Twitter at CFF Jared, at Chasing the Natty. You can find me at Justice_2318. Ethan?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter as well at Ethan Sauers. So having extra fun filling out that Devy guide not the Devy guide, but the CFF guide as well. That's been a lot of fun and flying through that. I know all of the guys over there have been working their butts off with that. But
yeah, I think we're almost to 100 of the team previews done. So we don't.
Yeah, crazy. So I think 4th of July weekend is the target on that one. So we'll have that out and ready for everybody.
I know probably the thing that's taken the most time for me is I've tried to contact fans. Like I'll find message boards or Twitter accounts and kind of have them vet the depth charts that I come up with.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get response, sometimes I don't, but I did try to get the most accurate depth chart I could.
I mean, it's some real sicko mode business when you're combing through, G5 offensive line depth charts to try and find out who's starting and who's returning. So we're putting in that hard work so that everybody else doesn't have to, right?
Yeah, and definitely got to shout out Nick at CFB Winning Edge, right?
Absolutely.
Because his tools are phenomenal, and helping to be able to figure out, especially like you said, the offensive line depth chart there.
Yeah, I try and do a comb through before I check his depth chart to make sure we come up with the same thing. If we're both come out the same side, then I'm cool with it.
I do the same thing. Like I'll come up with my own, and then I'll go look at his information and see like, hey, if I wasn't able to figure it out, I'll use his or see where we're where we don't match up.
Yeah.
Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. Jared has a goal of reaching 1,000 subscribers by the start of the season, so please help reach that goal. And on podcast form, wherever you can leave a review, please leave those 5-star reviews. That would be awesome. And finally, before we get started, shout out to the CFF team over at Campus to Canton. Jared Palmgren, Nate Marquise, Chris Kay, Brandon Sanders, Chris Moxley, Ethan Sauers, Justin Volume Pigs, and myself, Justice. So before we get started, and the main topic today with supplemental players, we wanted to talk about Oronde Gadsden, who recently got tight end position eligibility on Fantrax. What are your thoughts on that, Ethan?
I am bummed that I don't have him in more spots already. I'm a big C2C player, so in probably 30 leagues on Campus to Canton League. So I don't have him in nearly enough spots, but the ones I do, I am loving because you've essentially got a tight end, in my opinion, tight end 1, tight end 2 right there with Brock Bowers. Yeah. So a lot cheaper than you would have bought Brock Bowers for last year too. So it's definitely a game changer, and how your commissioner in your league handles position changes and position eligibility is going to be another hot topic. I'd say this is much more impactful than CJ Donaldson last year.
Yeah, most of my leagues just kind of go with what Fantrax does because that's just kind of the easiest thing. And I can't blame a commissioner for doing that because they have to do so much other work that certainly makes sense. And so in that case, Gadsden's going to be a tight end, and you alluded to how we would have him ranked. I haven't updated my rankings since we did the summit because they were locked for a period of time. So that's something I need to work on the next week or so, but. I think Gadsden would be tight end 1 for me. And the reason why I say that is I just feel like this sounds weird to say, but he feels like a little bit safer than Brock Bowers.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And so I think he would be my tight end 1 in a tight end required league for sure. Yeah.
And I mean, we're kind of taking advantage of the fact that Jared's not here to brag on the dogs a little bit here, but I agree with you. I think he is a safer pick, and I think that it's not an artificial change either. He does line up as a tight end, as a split tight end very frequently. And Robert Ane, I know he's gone, but he was working with tight ends and had that sweet spot with tight ends. I assume having his internal replacement. Being very much in a similar mind, I think that Gadsden being there is just mismatch central, and I think you've got a wide receiver 1 as a tight end, and why not go with it, and why not lock those numbers into your tight end spot?
Absolutely. I mean, he I think that he is listed as a tight end on the Syracuse actual official roster.
Yeah.
And so unless he changes there, I don't see Fantrax going back and changing it.
Yeah.
Now. Some people have said that he was listed as a tight end on the roster last year. And I don't know if that's true or not. I would my gut tells me if it was true that people would have been complaining last year that he wasn't listed as a tight end.
Yeah, right.
So I'm a little skeptical if he was actually listed as a tight end on the 2022 roster. And I haven't, and their 2022 roster might still be on their website. I don't know. I haven't went back and looked to check that.
Probably is, and I'm not 100% sure. I know that would have been something that I would have paid a little bit closer attention to if I saw that he had some tight end eligibility. So I'm not 100% sure there, but it's definitely the new reality, and the reality that you've got to adjust to with these CFF rosters, because I mean that's a potentially league altering shift.
Yes.
With that.
And if your league mates aren't paying attention, it kind of gets to our next point is where to draft him.
Yeah,
you probably can get him a little bit later, right? Because people are going to be on like the Brock Bowers, the Keithy, the Jatavian Sanders.
Yeah,
I probably think for sure. First. Yeah,
and I mean, as long as it's not a tight end premium league or I know there are a few of those tight end premium 2 tight end leagues where everybody pays ultra close attention to those tight ends, and they work their way up the draft board much sooner than later. I mean, I'm probably still going to be looking at him. You know, I wouldn't hesitate pulling the trigger in the second if he's there at the end of the second. You know, I don't think you necessarily need to. If you want to live a little dangerously and let him drop a little bit further, you can definitely try that out. But I have zero hesitation drafting him where I'd be drafting Brock Bowers. And I know in most leagues, if you've got, I know Moxley is a big tight end early fan. So if you're in a league with Moxley, you might have to pull the trigger a little sooner. But, you know, second round is no hesitation on Gadsden.
Yeah, to your point, like you said, you really have to know your league and who your league mates are. Yeah. And, you know, if you have some sharks or sharp people in your league that listen to this podcast or pay attention on Twitter that know Gadsden's a tight end, then they're probably gonna, you know, take him a little earlier. I agree with you. I would have no problem taking Gadsden where most people are taking Bowers in a tight end required league.
Yeah.
And I'd feel better about it because, like we said before, it just feels like a much safer pick than Bowers. Like, I personally would not. I don't think I would take Bowers as high as he's going, but I wouldn't have a problem taking Gadsden as high as Bowers is going.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely just roster construction preference on if you're taking a tight end that early, but the ability now to have, you know, a few different options there. And it's, before it was, you know, is Bowers off the board? Okay, well, I'm going to wait a little bit on a tight end, but you've got that second option now. You have a little bit more flexibility in your roster constructions. So definitely worth looking into. And, you know, if you're not as familiar with his game, definitely worth checking out because he's fun to watch.
Yeah, it adds another tight end in that, I don't know, tier 0, tier 1, whatever you want to call it.
For sure.
Him and Bowers, and then you kind of have another tier with Kuthi and Sanders, and then I think everyone else is kind of after that. So
yeah.
All right, so we'll move on to the main topic for today, and that is supplemental players in your dynasty league. So these players met the following 2 criteria and how we selected them. Number 1, they were outside the top 500 players owned at the end of 2022, and they had to be available in at least, I'm assuming this is Jared, at least one of Jared's dynasty leagues. And I know I'm in at least 2 dynasty leagues with Jared, and I'm in quite a few dynasty leagues as well. And I would say the majority of these guys are available. I can't think of the only one that I would say that might not be, at least in the leagues I'm in, is probably Bert Emanuel Jr. But the other
he came on last year.
But the other guys are pretty much available in all the leagues. So we'll jump right in here to the quarterbacks. The first quarterback is Shadur Sanders, which he should be available in every league, right? Because he's a move up from the FCS following his dad up to Colorado from Jackson State. So what do you think about Shadur?
Yeah, I was, you know, I've been hesitant to buy into any of the Colorado buzz with Primetime, Coach Prime over there. But you know, the more I dug into Shadur and his numbers from last year, you can see, I mean, he for those listening and not watching the slideshow here, you know, 341 completions on 483 attempts at the FCS level, throwing for 3,700 yards and 40 touchdowns. I mean, it's impressive what he was able to do, you know, at Jackson State. So I'm probably fading him at cost. I struggle to bring myself around on just so many unknowns. You know, he's got to step up to the jump up in competition, but he's also got a supporting cast that is just a flurry of questions around him. You know, they've got a great wide receiver room. Their wide receiver room is, I'd say, you know, one of the best or one of the more crowded rooms, you know, in P5. Whether or not these are guys that are going to be able to separate themselves and really have strong performances is going to be another thing. And, you know, I question that Colorado offensive line, but the thing that is his bright spot and what I think is what makes him worth considering at price is the fact that he's likely going to be in so many shootouts. He's going to be playing from behind a whole bunch. And I mean, he's not a zero with his legs either. You can see that 85 rushing attempts, 173 yards for 6 touchdowns last year. I don't think he's going to be as lucrative as he was at the FCS level, as prolific. But I mean, it's upside. He's this year's Cam Ward in that sense. He's got a lot of questions around him, but if he shows up in a way that a lot of people think he can, then sky's the limit for him for sure.
Yeah, I think the positives for him, like you said, are simply volume. He's going to be featured, right? He's the coach's son. He's. I mean, they don't have much behind him. They don't have a established running back behind him yet. He's definitely going to be featured in this offense. And Colorado, like you said, is bad. They aren't good. The defense is horrendous. I don't know about the offensive line. I think they do have some players at receiver that with Travis Hunter playing both ways, Jimmy Horn, Xavier Weaver. So I think they have some weapons in the receiving game. Running back, they have Dylan Edwards. And I know they seem to be always actively trying to find someone else.
McCaskill's getting floated out there a bit
to help that room out, right? And so, but yeah, I think the positive for Shedeur is volume, and like you said, the fact that he's going to be having to pass a lot because they're going to be behind. I don't really see that defense stopping anyone.
It's really funny too. I see a lot of similarities with the way Colorado's offense is set up this year, and what we expected out of Colorado State last year. With that Norvell system moving to Colorado State, so many people were expecting Clay Millen to just take off. Now, Clay Millen, totally different quarterback than Shedeur, doesn't have the mobility. But the thing that sunk that ship just so quickly last year was Colorado State's lack of offensive line and the fact that they just couldn't protect Clay Millen. I'm really interested to see, if that same problem arises in Boulder for the Buffalo. Does the mobility that Sanders has, is that enough to get a different outcome and yield a different result? I think there's a chance that it does. Sanders' play out of structure is, like I said, much different ball game than Clay Millen's.
Yeah. He, I haven't been in a draft yet. I've only been in an auction draft so far this year, and Shedeur's gone, for my taste, a little high.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I haven't really been in on him, but I haven't been like in a traditional draft. My guess is he's probably going around 10-ish, somewhere around there. I don't have Jared has the ADP. I don't have all that stuff in front of me, but that's just kind of a guess on my part.
I've done a few C2C supplementals already this year, and from what I've seen, round 6, round 7, even. We're getting guys who are really just buying into that Colorado hype train. Once the top freshmen, obviously C2C a lot different than a CFF Dynasty, but once those top freshmen are gone, he's there. So if you're in a CFF Dynasty, a supplemental draft there, I could see him going, round 2 or 3 if these guys are super high on him.
Yeah, absolutely. And a supplemental, right, that's just going to push him up because the player pool is so much more limited. When I was saying 10 round, I was more thinking, I guess, for redraft. Kind of where I was thinking he probably is. But yeah, absolutely. A supplemental, he's probably going, like you said, in the middle rounds there. Maybe even higher, like, if it's a 2 or 3 quarterback league.
Yep.
All right. So next we're going to move to Ethan's favorite.
Oh,
Malik Hornsby at Texas State had some big news yesterday.
I've been told you've been given the challenging task to try and reel me back in with my my Hornsby takes.
Until the news yesterday, I probably wouldn't have been the best choice to rein you in. But with the news of TJ Finley moving or committing to Texas State, that does concern me. I don't know that he's a better quarterback than Malik Hornsby, but the fact that the staff felt they needed to bring him in is what concerns me.
I totally get that. I am full on, hashtag praise be to Hornsby on Twitter this year. He's my guy. If I'm looking at my guy this year, Malik Hornsby definitely fits the bill. The TJ Finley news, I saw Chris K tweeting about it, and how when you look at their stats and you look at, their pedigree coming from, both coming from Power 5 conferences, both have similar completion percentages over their career. But the big differentiator for me is, Malik Hornsby was competing against an incumbent KJ Jefferson that was already established in that Arkansas system. And it was going to be a huge task for him to be able to overcome KJ Jefferson. And KJ is sticking around, Hornsby obviously didn't want to wait on the sidelines for that. But going ahead and flipping that to TJ Finley, I mean, we're talking about a guy who was run out of time by Max Johnson and Peyton Thorne. These are not guys who should really have any legitimate quarterback transferring to another place. But, I get the fact the staff wanted to bring in somebody else, but in the days of the transfer portal, not only do you need to make sure you have somebody stylistically who can be a plug and play should Hornsby go down, especially if you're running the ball with a quarterback so often you worry about durability. But you also need somebody who, if Hornsby plays the way that we expect him to play, there is really no reason why he couldn't go and transfer again to a Power 5 school who is able to see him now that he's given the reins to an offense and able to develop solely as a quarterback and not being tried out as a wide receiver like he was at Arkansas last year. So I'm not scared off by the Finley transfer at all. But man, Hornsby in that Kinney offense is just so tantalizing with what Kinney was able to do at the FCS level and able to produce the numbers with I think Lindsey was his quarterback at the lower level. So able to get him the Walter Payton Award, which is essentially the FCS Heisman. I think he knows exactly how he wants to use Hornsby. I think he wants to rely more on the legs because he knows this might not be as reliable as a drop pack and hit your man offense. I think he saw the struggle from going from Incarnate Word to the FBS level with the Cam Ward experiment last year. But something that's really interesting too with Hornsby and this whole Texas State offense is that he essentially poached the entire Incarnate Ward offensive line to come with him to Texas State. Something I've never seen before. Literally 5 guys from Incarnate Word transferring up to the next level to be that offensive line at Texas State. He knows what he's doing. He's got the plan. The fact that he made such a strong push for Hornsby early on, and the fact that he was also able to convince Ashton Hawkins, Texas State's best wide receiver, that they were going to be throwing the ball and they were going to be a prolific offense. He was able to convince him to come back from the portal after his hiring. And I think that's all because of, Malik Hornsby being there and Hornsby having the extra time in the system with spring ball. I'm gushing over here, but I just love Hornsby's fit in this offense. And I think he is an absolute bold gold star. Do whatever you need to do to prioritize him in your supplemental this year.
The thing that I guess concerns me also, in addition to the staff bringing Finley, is I just feel like Finley and Hornsby are kind of two different quarterbacks. I feel like Hornsby is obviously much more athletic, the way better runner. But I do think that Finley might be a better passer than Hornsby. And so I know that sounds weird to say because I don't think Finley's that great either. But
Yeah.
So that part, just I don't know. It worries me a little bit. I think Hornsby is, in my opinion, like ultimate boom bust.
I get that. He is.
And I was a little concerned about that boom bust potential before Finley, and now with Finley in the mix, it just kind of, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, again, I've not been in a regular draft to see where Hornsby is going. If I can get him late enough, absolutely, I'm in.
He's going unreasonably high, even for me.
And that's what I've experienced in the I've only been a part of auctions so far, and people are spending $100 plus on an auction for him, and that's just it's a little bit rich for my blood,
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point too about talking about the difference between an auction or startup cost versus him being available in the supplemental, because I've done probably 3 or 4 startups this off season so far, and Hornsby has escaped me in all but one of them. Because there's just one more guy in that league that likes him just a little bit more than I do.
Yeah.
I'll be willing to pull the trigger maybe, round 8, and that's pretty lofty with going with a quarterback in a startup.
Yep.
But at the same time, if you're in a supplemental league now, or if you're doing a supplemental draft, you're not necessarily starving for that consistency and that making sure that you have a solid floor with such a high pick. I think that there's a lot of strategy talk to be concerned with swinging for the fences in your supplemental drafts, especially if you, assuming it's not an orphan team that you're taking over and that it's a team that you've constructed and built well. You should have a little bit of consistency, and you have ample time to go and get some floor options later on in supplemental drafts. Yeah. So, I'm talking myself into Hornsby a little bit earlier, even in my supplementals now. So,
I mean, he definitely, if he hits, he's going to hit, and he's going to be a league winner, right?
Yeah. And the fact that, how much we loved him, from pure speculation back at Arkansas just a year ago. People were talking about, man, well, if KJ falters or if he's injured, Hornsby's athleticism alone is enough to make him a viable option in the SEC, like full stop. And now he's at Texas State. Like, what are we doing? He can make guys look silly out there in the Sun Belt Conference. And I'm, I am, like I said, I'm prioritizing him top of the list as somebody to consider in supplemental drafts.
Absolutely. All right, so we'll move on to another quarterback who I feel like has just as much potential, and you're probably getting him way later than Malik Hornsby.
Yeah.
And that's Burt Emanuel Jr. I think the biggest question mark with him is who's going to win the job? Is it Jace Bauer or Burt Emanuel Jr.? And to me, like, both of them, you're getting them so late in drafts, and once we get word of who the actual starter is going to be, like, I think the sky's the limit for them for CFF. I know Burt Emanuel seems to get more of the fanfare, so to speak, but Jace Bauer, he put up good rushing numbers too when he was able to when he played last year, and Bauer's Bauer's the better passer as well. So I don't know that it's a foregone conclusion that I think most people think Emanuel is going to win the job, but and I think both of these guys are available, in most leagues.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting the way Central Michigan is positioned this year. Obviously they're replacing Lou Nichols, and that offense has a lot of questions around them and what kind of an offense they're going to set up. I remember, I think it was Nate Marquise who was on this very show earlier in the year talking about, the upside with Emanuel is there, and his rushing ability is so good that there's even talk about him getting some play at running back if he doesn't win the job.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure, right?
Yeah, and he's just so prolific, and just the same way we were gushing about Hornsby, we should be doing the same for Burt Emanuel, and the fact that you can get him cheaper, like you said, is just a slam dunk. He is, very similar. I'm on record. My 2 guys that I will stand on Twitter for years to come. Malik Hornsby and Kyle Kelly from Ball State. And I think Bert Emanuel Jr. is just Kyle Kelly plus, to be honest. I think he's got more athleticism than Kelly does, and he's got probably a little bit more likelihood of ending up with that starting job. With Hatcher being at Ball State for Kelly to compete with, I think that's an uphill battle for him, even though I am just such a big fan of his game. But Emmanuel Jr. easily league-winning upside late in the year when Maction starts. And, the thing that everybody kind of forgets, I think, in Maction competition is that it starts to get cold earlier up in the MAC, and you've got these Tuesday, Wednesday night games in snow and frosty conditions where it's just easier to run the ball, and coaches want to run the ball more. So I think given that, and given his just screaming upside with his legs, he's somebody who, even if he doesn't win the job, they're going to be giving packages for him to get the ball in his hands.
And I think, to your point, if he doesn't win the job, I think he's going late enough in drafts that if I'm drafting him, I'm going to draft Bauer too, right? You're able to get them both so late that it makes that's it just seems like a no-brainer to draft them both, and then after the first couple of weeks, you'll be able to drop one of them and move on. But I would absolutely draft both of them, secure that position, because whoever it ends up being him, Bauer or Emmanuel, I think you're getting a great CFF quarterback at a super bargain right now.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see. We talk about this with all the quarterbacks that I've just mentioned, with Hornsby, with Kelly, with Emmanuel. We always talk about their legs, but these guys are in a quarterback battle where they're getting very closely monitored and very finely tuned reps to help with their development as a passer as well. But I think that the competition that they're dealing with is a great thing, because it helps them develop their game. If any of them puts it together and is able to be a competent passer, they can light their conferences on fire with that, because they're already feared because of their legs. But they can be a true nightmare with even just competent passing.
One last point on the Central Michigan quarterback situation. You said earlier about them losing Lou Nichols, and I feel like that the running attack is going to be led by a quarterback there this year. I think whoever the starting quarterback is will be the leading rusher for Central Michigan.
That's interesting too. I know they've got Miles Bailey and somebody else who stepped in for Nichols last year.
Yeah,
but
I can't think of his name either. And it's not. To my opinion, it's not Bailey that's probably the starter. It's the other guy, and I can't. Oh man, I can't think of his name off the top of my head.
Well, Central Michigan did something weird too, and they had like 3 or 4 primary scrimmages. They had scrimmages each week that they had spring practice, so they didn't have a true spring game. But in both of those, the Bailey and again, I can't think of the replacement running back that.
Yeah, I'm trying to look it up right now.
Yeah, but both of those guys had huge scrimmages. At least one for each of them. They had over 100 yards and multiple touchdowns. Marion Lukes, there we go.
Yeah, that's the one.
So it's interesting. That to me suggests that the defense that they're going up against in Central Michigan's defense might be just really awful this year, which is just wheels up even more for Bert Emanuel or Jace Bauer, whoever gets that job.
Yep, absolutely. All right, next is Hawaii quarterback Braden Shager. Now, he is someone that I was super high on the Hawaii offense last year.
Yeah.
And I was at least a year early, maybe 2 years early on that. But I've kind of soured a little bit just because because I was so invested in the Hawaii offense last year that I watched their first couple of games, and that offensive line is
brutal.
So bad. Oh my! It's probably one of the worst offensive lines in all of FBS, and it's not any better this year. And so that's probably that's kind of really tempered my expectations for that offense.
Yeah, I get that. I too had, more Shager than I wanted last year, and he's
I think
probably
I owned him in every
available.
league I was in.
Oof, yeah. And the arrival of Timmy Chang as the coach was just such a boom for that Hawaii program, because Todd Graham was just a culture ruiner. He was just miserable with what he brought to that program, and it's no surprise that they had such an exodus of talent and depth on that team. So seeing Timmy Chang come in last year, I knew that there was a likelihood, very similar, like I mentioned earlier, to Colorado State's demise last year. But I anticipated Hawaii's demise. I didn't necessarily anticipate Colorado State having such a hard time. But Hawaii, they've always had a little bit of a gimmick to their offense, and they've always had a little bit of a gimmick to scheming that pass. And last year, Timmy Chang tried to implement the run and shoot when he first got there. I know a lot of people are questioning, why didn't Timmy Chang try and do the run and shoot last year? Like that's their bread and butter. That's what Hawaii's been known for in so many years. That's what Timmy Chang himself ran when he was there. Yep. He tried to implement that, but I think it was just depth concerns and the fact that they didn't have the personnel to truly excel with that run and shoot offense like he wanted. And so they ended up rolling out what was kind of a hybrid RPO run and shoot kind of blend. And it wasn't good, but giving that full commitment to the new run and shoot offense and giving Shager a full year, I'm pretty sure he's locked in as a starter there. I think
I feel confident saying that for sure.
Yeah, I know that they have 4 or 5 guys there that are in the room and that get mentioned as having reps this time of year, but I think Tristan Gebbia from Oregon State transferred in. He's the only guy that I think has maybe a little bit of, experience with a bigger program that might push Shager a little bit. But Shager is young enough that I think the program wants to build around him, and they want to give him a fair shake at implementing this new scheme. So he's a guy who you have the ability to again take later in your drafts. I don't think he's going particularly high. A lot of people, if they were on him last year, they're not on him this year. So kind of that post-hype sleeper that you've got. But I mean, just with the nature of this program and with the expectation that they're going to be pass heavy and implementing that run and shoot offense, he's worth a stab late in league drafts to be able to take a shot on him, stash him on your bench. If he blows up, he blows up. And you should know a little bit earlier in the year with Hawaii, they get that extra game. I believe they're playing week 0. So I'm not 100% sure on that, but you'll at least get a little look at him a little earlier, which is always a plus. But I've seen much flimsier plays work out than Braden Shaker.
Yeah, I mean, I think at cost, I will say this. So I've done 3 auctions so far, and 2 of them, no one bid on Shager. Now, last year I was getting him for like $1, which great value, right? Or getting them in the 20th round or whatever, great value. But the one auction that he did go in, to me, he went a little high. It was, I want to say, in like the $60-$70 range. And so obviously that person really, really believes. And that's probably a little bit too rich for me. But I think in general, like you said, you're getting them really, really cheap, whether it's through an auction or a draft. And and again, like you're going to know really soon whether he's going to do much, And so, like you said, you get that week 0 preview, and if that offensive line looks terrible once again, then hey, he's someone I'm going to be able to drop and move on. So definitely at cost, he's another guy at cost. I think that can help, especially if you draft him, like let's say Caleb Williams, right, and or Drake May or someone like that, and you're able to and you wait on quarterback and you have some other safe options, but then Shaker hits, right? You have two really great fantasy options for CFF.
And especially in in CFF Dynasty as opposed to C2C, you could go and you could sell Caleb because he's got the name recognition.
Yeah.
You know that he's not playing championship weekend. So
Yep.
I mean, if you've got Caleb on your team or you've got one of these established guys, taking shots and these cheap options to kind of bolster the bottom of your quarterback room really provides a great opportunity to flip and get value and potentially carry you to a championship. So
absolutely. All right, so the last quarterback, someone near and dear to Jared's heart, I guess. He wanted us to make sure we talked about him, was Mitch Griffiths. And to me, Mitch Griffiths is one of those safe options that, he's the clear, starting quarterback for Wake Forest. And Wake Forest has been a fantasy-friendly quarterback system for a number of years now. And I see no reason why Griffiths can't do that. I mean, he started one game last year against VMI, the first game of the year, when Hartman was out. And, most of his stats came from that game. I think he was probably a little over 300 yards or close to 300 yards, and 3 of those 5 touchdowns came in that game. Obviously, it's an FCS opponent, and, so you take that for what it is. But I do think he can, put up, QB 2-3 numbers for you for your CFF team.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about Wake Forest this year. And Griffiths is a big part of that mental math and that calculation. We have seen them be a strong fantasy option, even going back with Jamie Newman before Hartman. But just something about that scheme and the slow mesh that Clausen rolls out. I'm not sure how much of that is on the quarterback and how much of that is scheme dependent. Obviously with Sam Hartman leaving and going to Notre Dame, I think we'll find out very quickly how much of that has been Hartman and how much of that is Clausen's scheme. Jamie Newman, I believe he dealt with some injury before when he transferred to Georgia, so he didn't necessarily get a fair shake at that starting job. I'm sure Jared would be able to give a little bit more context on the Jamie Newman all-time Georgia great quarterback there. But so I'm wishy-washy on Mitch Griffiths, which means I'm not going to get a whole lot of him. I don't have a strong take, so I'm not going to go out there and get him early. But that whole offense is kind of shifting and changing. Justice Ellison is a guy who I'm actually on quite a bit at running back. Christian Turner left. I believe he went to Indiana. And that running back room is very young outside of Ellison. So, I take it or leave it with Mitch Griffiths. I'm not his biggest fan, but it wouldn't shock me if, like you said, he was a QB2, QB3 flex play.
Yeah, he just feels like a very safe option to me. I don't know that his ceiling is super high, but he's going late enough in drafts where I think you could take a shot on him. I'm probably in the same boat as you, Ethan, where I'm not, because I'm probably taking a shot on like a Bert Emanuel Jr. or someone like that has just
and
kind
he's
of
going after Griffiths too,
right?
So
like someone like that has more unbelievable kind of ceiling, higher ceiling.
Yeah,
that's kind of what I would generally tend to do in a draft. But yeah, if Griffiths goes late enough, if I get him as my quarterback 4, right, that'd be a good spot, and he's someone that I think has the potential to maybe be your QB too.
Yeah, and I get why Jared likes him. He's talked him up on previous episodes here, but he's safe, and he's somebody who you'll get the production out of. I don't think Wake Forest is going to be boat racing anybody where they'll have to rely on the run too heavily. So he's good volume and a consistent option.
When you mentioned Justice Ellison, that reminded me there was something I wanted to mention when we talked about Shager, and so as we kind of transition now to the running backs, another running back that's not on our list, but I think that deserves mention is Tylan Hines from Hawaii. He definitely, I know for a fact he meets these criteria.
Yeah.
And he's definitely someone that I've been targeting in my drafts because you're getting him free. and
Absolutely.
I think he can. I think he's going to produce in the running game as well as in the passing game. So
yeah, especially if that offensive line is risky.
yeah,
Quick passes, screens, and draws.
in a
That's how you help
PPR
us.
league, should definitely be a target
For sure.
So moving on to the running backs, probably the biggest name we have here on our list today, and that's Jaquindon Jackson, who ironically is a former quarterback.
Exactly. Great transition here. Yeah.
I believe he started at Texas and then transferred to Utah, and then Utah kind of transferred or transitioned him to running back. So what do you think about Jaquindon?
He is like quintessential Utah Ute running back in my head. I think, the staff is bonkers about him because of his toughness and his grit. And he's just the guy, I think Coach Witt is just loves Jaquindon Jackson. We had all that weirdness around Tavion Thomas last year, and it kind of made this whole Utah backfield extra muddy, extra cloudy. Jalen Glover is still there
Chris
to
Curry.
provide. Yeah, Chris Curry. So there are other options for Jackson, and I think that they've been hesitant to give him the full workload. And I think part of that is coming over from quarterback, allowing him time to, get the proper muscle on and add the right weight to be able to be a 3-down back. But I would not be surprised at all if they lean on him and they really start to ride him a lot heavier this year. Last year, he primarily made his living in second halves of games. He was the bruiser that came in that was able to capitalize on tired defenses. And it worked for Utah. I mean, they went to the Rose Bowl. They had a great season, won the Pac-12. And I think, especially if there's any hesitation with I'm blanking on the quarterback who's injured for whatever reason.
Cam Rising.
Yeah, Cam Rising. If there's any hesitation with his health and he, isn't healthy to start the season, I think that the ground game and Jaquindon Jackson is going to eat. So I'm bullish on Jackson. I think he's a great pickup. And he's a guy I actually have a draft that's going right now that just kicked up, and was hoping that he'd make his way back to the 11th pick in the first round, because I'm running back needy in that league, and he was taken off the board at number 2. So
Oh wow.
he is definitely a hot commodity right now. I didn't anticipate him to be quite as hot as that, but he's definitely a guy who is a great option early, because Utah has a tendency of running the ball, and he fits the bill as the next man up.
I think my concern or hesitation with him is he's being drafted as if he is going to be the man, right? And I don't know that's as much of a foregone conclusion as most people think. Do I think he's going to lead the backfield? Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's going to get the goal line carries, absolutely. But is he going to get the 20, 25 carries a game? I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Micah Bernard's still there. Like you said, Jalen Glover, Chris Curry.
Yeah.
They have Michael Mitchell, freshman, who some people like as well. And so that's my concern with him, is that, he's kind of the 15 carry, 60 yards and a touchdown guy.
That's totally fair. That's
kind of what he was last year, right?
Exactly. And that's his MO up until this point. But there is a little bit of projection that I think you just have to do, and when doing that,
you have to, right? Because that's where he's going.
Exactly. And so projecting that a little bit of an increase in carries, even if it is still a committee and he's splitting carries and mainly a second half guy. If you're going to go after a guy that doesn't have that role completely locked down, you're at least getting a guy who should have around half of the workload plus the goal line carries. And so I think that is understandable to see why he's loved by so many. I know Felix is big on him, even as a pro prospect, I believe. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but
I'm a little bit iffy on that too, right? I just don't know. I mean, granted, he's kind of new at the running back position, so maybe he'll learn and just. His pad level seems really, really high when he's running, and
Yeah.
Maybe
that was
that'll
his
work.
big knock. I feel like coming
Yeah.
and transitioning as a running back.
He runs like a quarterback, right?
Exactly.
That's what he was as a quarterback. I in drafts I always find myself where there are players that I think have just as much upside as him, but are safer. And
Totally.
So I end up taking those players over Jackson. But like you said, he's definitely a hot commodity right now, and I don't see that slowing down. So if you want him, you're gonna have to go after him early.
For sure.
All right, our next running back, Shady Clayton from Tulane, taking over for Ty Spears. He's someone that he transferred from Colorado. I guess he transferred last year.
Yep.
And he was either a 4-star or a 5-star recruit, right? He was pretty highly thought of.
I'm pretty sure he was a 4-star, but yeah, he has that pedigree.
And so I feel like people were excited about him last year, right?
Yep.
And Spears just kind of took over that backfield, but he certainly, with Spears gone, Cameron Carroll gone, it's definitely his time to shine. And he's someone that I think you're getting super late in drafts.
Yeah. With Tulane, I was surprised last year how much Tyjae Spears was able to dominate that backfield.
It's usually a committee.
Yeah, Willie Fritz, just notorious for distributing those carries to anybody who shows some promise, and maybe that speaks to Tyjae Spears' talent level, just a little more than I anticipated. But I fully anticipated more of a split, and so I was probably a year early on Clayton. And there's even some question marks around Clayton's command of the backfield this year. I mean, they've got Celestine, and they've got a true freshman, Arnold Barnes, who has really been a buzz in spring camp, as guys that have really started making their name known. But I think that Clayton has a few things going for him. I think he is likely the most talented running back on the roster right now. And the fact that he transferred in as a hot commodity, as a very highly recruited running back, I think that still does hold some weight, especially when you're looking at these G5 programs that get a high profile recruit like that in the transfer portal. I think there's a little bit more onus on them to really give them a fair shake and give them the opportunity to have that job, because the next time there's a high profile player in the portal and they are trying to recruit them, I mean, it's very easy for it to be a precedent situation where they say, well, Ashad Clayton transferred here a few years ago and he didn't get the job and he wasn't ever really given the ability to do that. And, I don't know how much players think about that. Sometimes I see these transfer announcements and I'm like, did you even think anything about that?
Right.
So there's some question there, but Clayton's profile coming out of high school and, the talent level there, I'm willing to definitely commit to Ashad Clayton as a mid-round running back target in these supplemental drafts. I think he is exactly the kind of name that you should be looking for to bolster your rooms late in drafts. If he's there late in drafts, middle, mid-rounds, I'd think, after round 6 or 7 in a supplemental, he's somebody who I'm starting to really, really get a hot trigger on. I really would be interested in that. Just because Tulane's going to be running the ball, that they have that Willie Fritz system that's so lucrative for running backs that I would have no hesitation there.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree with you 100%. I don't think anyone should be expecting him to put up Tyjae Spear numbers from last season.
Yeah,
but I think you should expect like 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns like that. I think that's kind of where I see him. And you're able, like I said, you're able to get him pretty late in drafts, and so he's definitely someone that you should be targeting for your CFF teams, or even
Yeah.
even if you play C to C too, right? Like he's
For sure.
he's someone that you should be targeting as well.
Yeah, and Michael Pratt should keep that offense pretty on schedule and not in a situation where they're playing from behind a whole bunch.
Yep. All right, our last running back for today is Kyrie Robinson from San Jose State. It's not someone I'm personally high on.
Yeah.
But with the loss of Elijah Cooks, and we're going to talk about another receiver here in just a second. I can definitely see him, kind of doing what he did last year, which was very quiet, right? 800 yards, but the double-digit touchdowns, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that he really has much competition,
Yeah, no, not at all.
in that room. And so he's someone that you're getting probably super, super late and can be a spot starter. And if he ends up, doing more than that, you got him so late, it's kind of, a no-brainer.
Yeah. So I know, and just to tease this for everybody else, I know we've got another San Jose State guy that we're going to talk about here soon. But I really like the San Jose State offense. For anybody not familiar or doesn't follow me on Twitter, or didn't hear what I talked about last year, but my Malik Hornsby last year was Chevron Cordero. I love him as a CFF player. And I think that he leads this offense and makes this offense. I mean, it's game changing the way that his transfer and the transfer of, the wide receivers that they brought in from Nevada, how they helped last year. That being said, I watched a lot of San Jose State last year, and Kyrie Robinson was somebody who always seemed to make more out of the opportunity than he should have been able to. This offensive line really struggled out of the gate last year early, and it was an uphill battle for them to be able to move the football. I made a prediction last year that I thought Chevron Cordero had quarterback 3 overall upside because of the way that this offense moves the ball and just their proclivity. Kyrie Robinson had a bigger role last year than I would have been able to anticipate. Yeah. And I really like him. Something that he's got going for him this year, he has 100% returning offensive line production coming back. So that entire offensive line comes back, and there's a good opportunity and a good chance that they're going to be able to run the ball a lot better than they were last year. I think this entire offense is going to look a little bit different with the departure of Elijah Cooks, with the departure of Braddock and Isaiah Hamilton. They are going to be looking for production, and I'm particularly interested in Kyrie Robinson out of the backfield as a pass catcher as well. 26 receptions last year for 144 yards. That doesn't sound like game-changing numbers, but when you add that to a 10 touchdown season, you're starting to get into some very interesting water as a CFF running back.
Especially at the cost you're getting him at, right? I mean,
for sure.
I mean, just the 10 touchdowns, that's just almost a touchdown a game. So that's 6 points right there every single game, plus, the yardage and if you're in a PPR league too, right? So
exactly.
He I mean, I don't have it right in front of me, but my guess is he had to average double digits last year.
Yeah.
And for as late as you're getting him, that's, even if you're just using him as a spot starter, right, there's value in that given the cost, his cost.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so staying with the San Jose State theme, moving on to wide receiver Justin Lockhart. He's someone that I'm personally high on, just because, like we mentioned earlier, Elijah Cooks is gone, and so Lockhart is, in my opinion, unquestionably, he's your wide receiver 1 for Cordero, and I expect him to get close to 1,000 yards and 6-7 touchdowns, and he seems to be forgotten about, and in most leagues, he's going, in my opinion, he's going criminally low. I just don't know why. I just think people have forgot about him.
Yeah, I 100% think he's just been a forgotten man. put up good numbers in Nevada in that Jay Norvell system with oh gosh, who was the quarterback? Who got
Oh gosh,
Carson Strong?
yeah,
Carson Strong. Yeah, see, I mean, he had CFF relevance back then, even if it was just on a daily fantasy radar. But he's able to be the guy in that offense. I don't have any doubts. Chevin Cordero, he's going to be throwing the ball. He's going to be throwing the ball a lot, I'd assume. Just with the system that San Jose State likes to run, they like to throw the ball. So Justin Lockhart seems like a plug and play kind of guy who's probably pretty late. I would expect him to go in the second half of most supplemental drafts, and a guy who, honestly, if I was in a startup, I think he should be owned already. Like, he shouldn't be slipping through the cracks at this point. But he's a high ceiling player and likely also has that low floor or that high floor as well.
Yeah,
to lock in.
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, there's not a lot of experience or competition there for catches for him, and so yeah, it's just like he's definitely criminally low, like I said, as far as terms of where he's being drafted at in leagues. People, the forgotten man. It's the best way to describe him.
Yeah.
And I think you could say this for this next guy too,
for sure.
Caleb Hood. I think people are so focused on Derwin Burgess that they forget about Caleb Hood, who had, almost 1,000-yard season last year in an offense that pass and pass some more.
It was a wake-up call to me when I checked in and did some digging on Caleb Hood before this show, because if you would have told me that he received 26 more targets than Derwin Burgess did last year, I would have laughed and said, no, he didn't.
Now, Burgess missed, was it the last? I don't know. He got injured.
Some time. He did.
They missed a couple games, but yeah.
He did, for sure. But the touchdown equity is what really made the difference. Burgess had 7 touchdowns, Hood there with 3. I think that there's definitely a lot more room for variance to take Hood into consideration here. I'm also curious as well with Davis Brin coming in and with Tulsa's kind of, him being at Tulsa previously and the way that Tulsa threw the ball last year. They were much more of kind of a check down middle of the field passing attack, at least from what I remember, and a lot less downfield. And I wonder if that plays into Caleb Hood's strengths just a little bit more. I don't know what tendencies Brin will be carrying over playing in a new scheme.
More like the possession guy.
Exactly. And he's a guy who I think would definitely line up as more of a security blanket and more of a guy who you can make the easier throws to, as opposed to necessarily trying to stretch anything. So it's something to consider, but Caleb Hood, I think, is criminally underrated, and I've been guilty of it up until this day. So
yeah, I'm just looking. It looks like I'm at Burgess. Maybe he missed like the last game or so. So he didn't miss a ton.
Yeah.
Because it looks like the last game he had stats in was November 10th. So they probably had one game after that at least.
Yeah.
I don't remember if they were in a bowl game or not. And the other thing too is Jeremy Singleton's gone, right? So and I think Jeremy Singleton was another guy, kind of like a possession type guy. So Hood can help fill some of that void. Now they did bring in Anthony Quealy from Syracuse.
I think he definitely lines up more as that Singleton replacement, just from a size standpoint.
Yeah.
He's a little bit bigger and can play in a similar jump ball fashion for what Singleton provided, but definitely worth noting that they still have a strong trio there.
Yes, they do, and even like they have some decent options at tight end too. I know that Moxley likes JJ McAfee, but they also brought in Keaton Upshaw from Kentucky, who looked good in the spring game as well. So there's definitely no shortage of passing options here. But fortunately, for us CFF folks, they pass the ball a lot. So
absolutely,
I think there's plenty to go around, and like we said, Caleb Hood is someone that gets overlooked or forgotten because people are so on Derwin Burgess. And so if you miss out on Burgess, Hood is a great option to get a piece of that offense, and you're getting him, I would guesstimate like half the cost, right?
Yeah,
Burgess
for
is
sure.
probably going, so much earlier than Hood. So
yeah.
All right. Next, the Duke offense. Not someone that not a team that's often thought about for CFF purposes, but in my opinion, they have three options, and Calhoun's one of them that I would consider in my CFF leagues. Now, we didn't talk about Riley Leonard. My guess is he was picked up last year in most leagues.
Yeah.
But he isn't. He is absolutely someone that you should be targeting. With the third option being Jordan Moore, who's a converted quarterback playing receiver. And actually, if you ask me to pick Moore or Calhoun, I'm probably going to pick Moore. But both of those guys should be available in your leagues, and I don't think you can go wrong with either option. I feel like Moore probably has much more higher ceiling than Calhoun. But I do feel Calhoun's probably the safer pick too.
Yeah, I watched the Duke spring game, and I first of all was shocked that Calhoun is still around. I would have bet money that he had left or graduated and was done with. But him coming back, I think that we are not high enough on these Duke options.
Oh, absolutely not. Like you're getting them. They're going undrafted. You're getting them for free.
Yeah, and so I mean Riley Leonard, I don't think has gotten enough credit for the development as a passer that he has really started. I mean, he looked very good and sharp in that spring game. They didn't split as a first team, second team. So it was teams were mixed evenly with first string and second string. But Calhoun and Samir Hagans both were on the side with Riley Leonard. And both of those guys looked like competent targets that I would keep an eye on and be interested in as CFF options for my offense. Jordan Moore played on the other side, and he was the security blanket through and through for the backup quarterbacks, who also, just spoiler alert, if you're playing in Dynasty, just guys to keep an eye on. Henry Bellin and Grayson Loftus both were very competent as backup quarterbacks in that spring game. So surprising, just because I think spring games in general, we don't see great passing performances.
Sometimes they tend to be a little vanilla.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that speaks to the talent that this Duke team is bringing back on offense at the skill positions. And I also would say that there's a tendency to think, if the offense is popping off in the spring game, then maybe this defense is really bad. But they've got a defensive-minded head coach heading into his second year as head coach, where I'd assume that we'd see growth on the defensive side, even if they lose some big production. So I don't necessarily have those same fears that this was a charade from Duke. So all of that to say, Jalen Calhoun, I think it's pretty safe that he's going to be the higher target share guy, just because of his veteran leadership and his experience within this offense. But Hagans and Moore are both guys that I'm really interested in, and if you can snag one or two of those guys at the end of your supplemental draft, I think you're going to look smart come fall. So
yeah, absolutely. I think I agree with you. Like I said earlier, I think Calhoun is kind of the safer option of all of them. I just really like Moore's upside. He's new to the position. He had some phenomenal games last year, and I think now he has all off season. Because the beginning of last year he was in the quarterback battle, right? With Riley Leonard, so he wasn't. It wasn't like he was practicing wide receiver.
Yeah, and it's always
He's
go ahead. I'm sorry.
He's had a full off season, right, where he's able to focus on wide receiver, and so I'm really excited about his potential.
It's always worth noting to me when guys change position on offense and are still starters, because to me that screams that the coaching staff is such a high and strong believer in their athleticism that they want to find ways to get them the ball. So I completely understand the love there.
And it always it's always enticing to me when a quarterback converts to receiver, right?
Yeah.
We've seen that happen time and time again in college and even in the NFL.
Yep.
And it's because those guys have such an in-depth knowledge of the offense and how a quarterback thinks, right? It kind of it's kind of like a cheat code almost. So that always excites me as well.
The only thing that could possibly be better is if their quarterback switched to wide receiver and then transfer to Texas State and become a quarterback again. I mean,
right.
Just so much knowledge there.
Oh man, I'm failing miserably about bringing in the Hornsby love, but that's all right.
That is okay.
All right. Next up is DT Sheffield, a wide receiver for Washington State, who had a great spring by all accounts.
For sure.
I'll say my concern with him is that the hype has gotten out in front of itself, and I feel like he is no longer a value anymore, and so I'm probably out because of the cost. I know people talk about the spring game, and he had I think 3 catches, like 112 yards and 2 touchdowns. Is that right? Something like that.
Yeah. He might have had 4, but very small.
Yeah, and so I just feel like. It almost like if you read practice reports from Washington State, it was almost like, 2 or 3 receivers were mentioned every day.
Yeah.
Now was he consistent? Absolutely, but I feel like others were mentioned quite a bit as well. And I don't know that he's going to get the volume that people are expecting, given where they are drafting him right now. At one point he was absolutely a value and someone that you should smash. Yeah. But now I think it's kind of flipped the other way, where people are taking him much higher than he should go.
And I think a lot of that is our desire to draft wide receivers in that Ben Arbuckle, Zach Kitley offense. So we see Arbuckle come over from Western Kentucky and now is there at Washington State. And I also get why we're looking at DT Sheffield as the guy in that room, because if you have 4 or 5 guys in a wide receiver room that all feasibly, like there's no indicator really tipping the hand of which one is going to be a volume hog, if any of them are.
Right. That
being said, targeting Sheffield is targeting the most athletic and the shiftiest and the most explosive guy in the room.
Absolutely. Yep.
So he's the guy who, in all accounts, likely has the best opportunity. Even if he doesn't get the most volume, he's going to make the most of whatever opportunity.
He's going to do more with less.
Exactly. So I get why Sheffield's been that guy, but you've hit the nail exactly on the head on where I stand with this wide receiver room. I think there's just so much better value outside of Sheffield. Josh Kelly from Fresno State is a guy that I've really enjoyed watching. He didn't have a great year last year as Fresno State brought in Nick Remeggio from Cal.
Nico Remeggio.
Yeah, they brought him in to play with Jalen Cropper, Marino Cropper. And so Josh Kelly kind of took a backseat to those guys. The year before last, though, he was a guy that was found pretty frequently in that Fresno State offense, and that Fresno State offense had a lot of guys to spread the ball around to. His presence on Washington State, he also had a great spring game performance as well. And I think that if you're looking at how Washington State is going to be spreading the ball, I think they're going to be using that 4 wide, and you're going to see Kelly a little bit more as a presence on the outside. I think all of the wide receivers will play all of the spaces. I think that's a flexibility thing that all of them possess, that they're able to play in different positions. Sheffield likely is going to be in the slot the most, though. And he's he's just explosive. He's a great guy to target with that. Kyle Williams, who is coming over from UNLV, seems like a possession guy and a security blanket on the outside. And they also had his name's escaping me at the moment, but
it's Lincoln Victor, I think is who you're thinking of.
Yes, Lincoln Victor.
That's the guy who I think will be the safety valve, kind of safety blanket from inside receiver standpoint.
From an inside receiver standpoint, I agree there. I think that he's going to be, if I had to say, I'd say Kelly and Williams on the outside and Sheffield and Victor playing some sort of an H-back inside slot kind of role, and getting moved around quite a bit. So
Victor, to me, I think is the guy that's going to get like 6 catches, 40 yards a game.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if he leads the team in targets.
Yes, that's my expectation.
His leadership and his experience there is something that I think will transfer over. He's also the only guy who's played any football with Cam Ward before this year too. So they've got such a deep receiver room. Sion Nunnally
or Ryan Nunnally, Peters is another one.
Man, they have some dudes at wide receiver, and I think that they are really going to blossom. I know I have like 12 quarterbacks who I love, but Cam Ward is another guy. His bust of last year be damned. I'm riding his bandwagon again this year. I think he is going to really show more growth, and any way that I can get exposure to this Washington State offense, I'm in on, and the cheaper the better.
Yeah. I think, like you said, I think people have overcorrected with Cam Ward. I think people have done the same thing with Quinn Ewers, where people had probably unrealistic expectations for both last year. They didn't live up to those expectations, and now they kind of flipped the other way. But that's great for CFF purposes, I think, in terms of value, right? Because you're able to get guys like that much cheaper, and when they hit, you didn't spend that high draft capital on them.
Yeah.
We've talked about 6 receivers now for Washington State, and so that's the other concern for me with Sheffield too. Is just that they're, and we talked about 6, but all 6 I feel like have gotten praise in the spring. And so it's just kind of hard to, I don't know, for me, it's kind of hard to spend the draft capital required to get Sheffield when, there could be a big rotation in that wide receiver room.
Yeah.
All right. Next, Devin Vosen from South Alabama, expected to be the next man up, taking over for Jalen Wayne. His running mate, Colin Lacey, is another person that I think gets overlooked as well. I personally, if I'm going to pick one, I'm going to pick Vosen. He kind of really showed out in towards the end of last year. I don't know if it was the bowl game or the last game of the regular season, man, but he had like a crazy stat line, right? Like, I don't know, like 18 targets, 11 catches, something like that. I'll let you talk. I'm going to try and look it up.
Yeah. I was higher on Vosen earlier in the offseason than I am now. I've done a little bit more digging on South Alabama, and I'm just not fully convinced that he's going to be far and away the best option there. I posed the question to the C2C Slack the other day about why he was so much higher in everybody's rankings than any other South Alabama target. Colin Lacey, you mentioned. They also get Javon Ivory from Memphis.
Yeah, I was going to say there was a transfer, and I couldn't remember who it was.
Yeah, Ivory's there. They've got Lincoln Sefcik at tight end. And Vosen, I don't – the main answer that I got was that they just expect Vosen to take much more of a step, and they think he's a better talent and that the talent's going to rise to the top. I was told, in the same way that Jalen Tolbert was there, in the same way that Jalen Wayne excelled at South Alabama, that he's expected to be that next guy up. So I don't know if I'm fully bought in with that hype, especially considering the fact that they're a run-first offense anyway. I'm cautious with any of my South Alabama receivers right now, and would likely be taking a guy like Colin Lacey or Javon Ivory later in the draft with the upside that it's a pretty flat distribution of targets like it was last year.
So it was the bowl game, and he scored 32 fantasy points. But he had 14 targets, 11 catches, 153 yards, and a touchdown.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the drafts I've done so far, he's gone very, very cheap. So at price, he's someone I'm definitely comfortable taking. I think I would prefer him over Lacey and Ivory. But if the hype kind of gets out of control like it did with Sheffield, I can definitely see, transitioning to Lacey or Ivory. The other thing that some people seem to be fixated on, and I don't know the history behind this, that maybe you do, Ethan, but I guess he switched numbers, number 5. So my guess is that must have been Tolbert's and Wayne's number. And so therefore, in people's mind, that has some significance that he's the man,
Yeah, there are some program numbers that are worth taking note of. I know a big a big tell for a lot of people is when somebody gets an offensive skill player is number 0. It's flames emojis for days in the chat when you see that. So 5, just being a historically a strong number for South Alabama there.
Yeah, let's see. It looks like Wayne was number 0 last year. So
yeah,
at least that's what Fantrax says. If we can trust that.
Yeah, right. Who knows?
All right. Next, someone that Jared is very high on. Ethan and I spoke about him a little bit last night. I'm not nearly as high on, just from the standpoint of the competition, but he's a recent transfer. He's leaving SMU.
Actually, Curly's still at SMU, I believe.
Oh my gosh. My I put this graphic together.
You're totally good, man.
And I totally screwed up. So I must have had Goffney on
Dylan
my mind.
Goffney.
I had Goffney on my mind. Oh my gosh.
I will say, a lot of people had been pumping up Curly at SMU, and I have firmly been a Goffney believer instead of Jordan Curly. So I was pretty bummed to see Goffney transferring, but
even when we were talking last night, like I was clearly talking about Goffney because I kept talking about Horton and Justice Ross Simmons. And I'm like, it just, oh man, anyway,
you're totally good.
Curly is at SMU, and yes, I do like Curly at SMU. He's by all accounts, he's the wide receiver 1 there. So for those watching, just ignore the Colorado State.
I will say though, with talk of competition, I think it is worth mentioning for SMU. They bring in, I think it's Brashawn Smith and Romello Brinson from Miami, following Lashley to SMU. And there's also a lot of buzz around Jordan Hudson. I personally think Hudson likely has a higher ceiling than landing at SMU, but I know that he had originally committed to SMU before flipping to TCU, so that they were in talks that they might be a player in getting him. So not necessarily an easy path for SMU and for Jordan Curley there. But down the stretch, he did seem to be the primary benefactor when Rashee Rice went down. Obviously getting Preston Stone and getting him adjusted down the stretch as Mordecai had some time off there. I'm curious to see if this SMU offense is able to keep up and be as prolific through the air as they have been. They have some really intriguing running backs too. LJ Johnson, I believe, is there, and Kamar Wheaton's still there. I think they got another transfer.
Jalen Knighton came over from Miami.
The other Miami guy, exactly. So, this SMU offense, we've become accustomed to SMU just throwing the ball around the yard, and I think they'll continue to throw, but it might not be as pass heavy as it's been in previous years. And Jordan Curley, if he's being touted as the wide receiver 1 for SMU, and people are buying him at the price of an SMU wide receiver 1, it's another thing where I'm not really sold on him being as dominant as Rashee Rice was.
Yeah. Like you said, there's a lot in addition to the Miami receivers. Cavante Dixon's still there.
Yep.
Teddy Knox, both 2 high profile transfers from last season.
Jake Bailey's there, I believe, as well. He was injured all spring.
And I know Jake Bailey was someone, last year that got a lot of praise. Now he was hurt, but he was someone that got a lot of praise last spring and summer. Yeah. And so, like you said, there's plus the tight ends, right? You got RJ Maryland.
And so Nolan Matthews is there too, and I was all in on him before RJ Maryland really blew up.
So there's definitely a lot of mouths to feed there at SMU,
sure.
and for Curley, I think it all comes down to price, right? When you're able to get him. Yeah. If he's going super early, I'd rather wait and take someone like Lockhart, who is much safer and has, in my opinion, just as high, if not a higher ceiling than Curley, right? And you're getting him much. I feel like you're able to get him much later.
At least Lockhart's going to be one of the 3 best, most talented players on that offense, outside of quarterback and outside of the starting running back. So,
absolutely. Well, once again, please forgive the graphic that I made here. He Curley did not transfer to Colorado State. That was Dylan Goffney. All right, so now we're down to the tight ends and our last player to discuss today, and that is Colston Loveland from Michigan, who really kind of came on towards the end of the year. A lot of people have high hopes for him, not only in CFF but in C2C leagues, right? Michigan is someone that that utilizes the tight end, and that that there's not many places in college football that we can get excited about tight ends for college fantasy, but Michigan's one of those spots. The only concern, I think, is that they also brought in AJ Barner, who a lot of people like from Indiana. But I think they are different enough players that they can coexist.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that I like about Colston Loveland is the ability that they have to move him around if they want to move him around. I believe he got a few carries last year as well, and that he's somebody who they just like utilizing him in the red zone. With the talent that they have at the backfield, and honestly, how much is Michigan going to have to throw the ball this year? I know a lot of people are projecting JJ McCarthy to improve and to be have a shot at getting his name in conversation for NFL draft circles. And so I think that, I think Harbaugh is going to try and honor that and do good by him, and give him some more opportunity to throw the ball. But Colston Loveland is such an athlete, even in just a limited time that he saw last year. He was electric, and getting an electric option at tight end, those words aren't really used in the same sentence very often, electric and tight end. So he's a guy that can really infuse some consistency into the offense. He stretches the seam, and he is he's speedy for a tight end. So he also fits that Harbaugh mold, though, of just kind of being a little bit more gritty, not avoiding contact. So he's a glorified wide receiver who just plays with a little bit of a chip.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. He reminds me of like a big slot receiver, more so than a traditional tight end.
I get Mike Gesicki vibes.
And hence the reason why I think him and Barner can, coexist.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Loveland, I want to say with the CFF rankings, he might be in our consensus top 10. I'm not sure about that, but he's somewhere right around there.
Last update, I remember seeing him towards the top 10. So,
but yeah, he's definitely someone that should be available in all your supplementals because he didn't really start making a name for himself. I feel like towards really like the playoffs, maybe the Big Ten championship game, right? So he wasn't picked up on waivers, and
he's definitely one of when I go into my supplemental drafts and when I've been looking around, and again it's C2C, so take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, but I think his pro potential is there too. But he's one of the top 3 tight ends that I'm looking for in the supplemental to see if he's available beforehand. He's available in almost every supplemental, but I'd only put him behind a guy like RJ Maryland might be available in some drafts.
I was going to say Maryland is one of the ones that I've seen consistently, along with Loveland, that's available.
Yeah, so I definitely am a believer in the talent there.
Yep, I agree with you 1,000%. And the only hesitation I have, and you kind of briefly talked about this, is that Michigan and why I'm not, Chris K is extremely high on JJ McCarthy, and the only reason I'm not in that same boat is just because they simply don't need him to do that to win. With the exception of like the Ohio State game or in the playoffs or a bowl game, for instance. But
the disrespect to my Nittany Lions right now.
Well, and I expect them to have a great year too. But I just feel like, just speaking in generalities, that Michigan's able to use the running game to win most of their games, and so and I just feel like that I feel like Harbaugh is very risk adverse, right? And so if he can win the game running the ball, that's what he's going to do.
I will say though, and maybe this is just recency bias with the fact that they did this to Penn State last year, but Michigan and John Harbaugh are not opposed to running up the score on that.
Oh, absolutely not. No. I agree there, right?
So especially early season, I don't know. I think Harbaugh, and this is a little bit arguing against myself because I made the point a bit earlier as well that I do believe that they're a run first team, but early in the season, I would say that Harbaugh is probably going to try and get McCarthy in rhythm and get him to midseason form, and kind of take the reins off a little bit and let him cook a little bit. So it'll be interesting. The development of the passing game at Michigan over the past few years, they get so much crap talked about them and not being able to throw the ball and not having that part of their offense. And that's what separates them from a true powerhouse of a team in today's college football world. But they have made such great strides at throwing the ball and moving the ball offensively through the air. It's really impressive what they've been able to do. And, those words taste like vinegar coming out of my mouth. So.
Yeah. I can appreciate that for sure. But that kind of wraps it up for today for the supplemental players. Any last thoughts you have, Ethan, before we close out?
No, just make sure you go and sign up for the pre-order of that C2C CFF guide that's dropping in first week of July. That will be well worth your membership fee over there, or if you want to pay for that separately if you're not at the top tier to get those free guides. And if you're looking for additional supplemental help, the Devian supplemental guides out there as well offer some great insight on players who are available for CFF leagues, dynasty leagues, and C2C leagues as well. So
absolutely, like that was a great plug. I was going to mention the supplemental guide, I think, and if you are a current subscriber to Camp to Scranton and you're not an NIL member, like upgrade to NIL. It is definitely worth the value there. And you get the 3 guides, the C2C supplemental guide, you get the Devi guide and the CFF guide as part of that membership. And in addition, you get to subscribe a one-on-one. You get to get a one-on-one call with members of C2C to kind of go over your rosters. Yep. And if you're in an IDP league, there's a checkbox for that. Check that, and then I'll be I'll join your call to kind of go over the IDP stuff. But yeah, the NIL tier is definitely where it's at. Also, there's an exclusive chat for the NIL in the Discord, and oftentimes some tools to get released to the NIL first before they get released to the general masses. And I can't emphasize what you said enough about that supplemental guide. That is it's written for C2C leagues, but that is a must-have for a CFF Dynasty League.
For sure.
It has just as much value there as the CFF guide we're producing because of all the information, the details about the freshmen. And so if you're in a CFF Dynasty League, you're going to want that supplemental guide as well as the CFF guide. So go ahead. That'd be $40. Might as well spend another 30 and get that NIL tier there. So
and also, since Jared wasn't here to iron out that spiel and give people the usual dose, just another encouragement to rate and subscribe to the podcast and follow not only Jared but also his Chasing the Natty official Twitter as well over on Twitter. So
yeah, and anyone, all the folks at C2C are great.
For
so
sure.
give all those a follow. I believe Austin recently made a list, a Campus to Canton only list that you can follow as well. That has all the Campus to Canton staff. So if you want to find all of our information, feel free to follow that list, and maybe you'll see me and Ethan in season again, or we'll be on CTN again, or on the bet was it bet on
C2C. That's
bet on
that's where
C2C. That's
you'll
right.
find all of your daily fantasy college football programming. So great time.
All right. Well, appreciate your times, folks, and have a good week.